But I remember like stepping out of the Accra airport and there were just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of like black faces like out in the airport. Like it felt like a sea, like a wash of these like faces staring at me. And
Welcome to El Cafecito Travel Talks with Tony Lloyd. Each episode, Tony sits down with travelers, expats, creatives, and community voices from across Latin America and beyond, sharing stories of travel, culture, connection, and the journeys that shape us. So grab a cafecito or a tea and enjoy the conversation.
Well, thank you and welcome for joining me here today. Would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
my name is Skye Jalal. I'm 23 years old. I'm a recent college grad who's traveling, and I'm here in Ecuador.
Okay, and obviously since this is a travel podcast, we're here to talk about your travels and what are you doing as far as your travels. Just to give us a brief explanation of the way you're traveling and what you're doing in this journey.
So I'm traveling on a Watson Fellowship, which is offered to people who just graduated from college, and I am working on a project that has to do with photography and how Afro-descendant people relate to land, and taking images of different families across the diaspora in different places that sort of negotiates with those questions. So far, I've been in Kenya, Ghana, Germany, and here.
Okay.
And I'll be headed to Mexico after being in Cuenca. Yeah.
Sounds pretty good. So, photography. What inspired you to get into photography? What was it about photography that called your attention?
I got into photography while I was in undergrad. At the time, I was studying art history. I had like a background interest in the arts, and I had done a lot of writing and things in high school, and I'd taken some art classes, but I'd never considered it seriously. And so at first I thought that I had wanted to just study art history purely and go through like an academic route. But I ended up in a intro darkroom class sort of serendipitously, and I just fell in love with it really quickly and really intensely. And I started with shooting film in my class, developing film and printing in the darkroom, and I just really loved the process. And also in my undergrad program, the photo department just had like a really strong sense of community, and I had like a very involved and like dedicated professor at the same time. And so I think just holistically, I fell in love with the medium, just really found a lot of community in that department. And so that's sort of how I started working in photo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Grant that you're on right now, how did you achieve it? Explain to us a little bit more. Maybe somebody's listening to us and they're like, how could I do that?
Yeah.
One of the things that I often say to people when they say, I can't afford to travel, I always say there's so many different ways to do it.
Yeah.
So explain a little bit about that.
So basically the way that the fellowship works is it's for like students who have just completed undergrad, and it gives you a year to travel and sort of explore a topic that you're interested in. And so I'd heard about it, and I had kind of cycled through like different topics that I was interested in or topics that I wanted to study. I just became really interested in just how African and African descended people form community in different parts of the world.
Okay.
And also how art relates to the like construction of those communities, and photography more specifically. And so I just sort of wrote my project, sort of just in inspiration of that.
And this program, is it available to everyone or just the people from your university? Or how does somebody acquire information about this program?
I think there are maybe 40 colleges that offer. It's a nonprofit, like a separate nonprofit outside of my college.
Okay.
And they offer funding to students from 40 different colleges, and they focus on liberal arts colleges, which is where I went. But they're all over the country.
Okay. But you don't know if, for example, if somebody's listening to us and maybe they're in England or not in the US, do you know if it's something that people could write into and apply for different areas, or is it affiliated directly with the college? If you don't know, that's okay too.
Oh, it's affiliated directly with the specific colleges. So, yeah, it's called the Watson, and yeah, like the funding is given through specific schools, so they have like partnerships with specific schools. So you have to be a student of one of these like 40 to maybe 45 different colleges.
Okay. Well, this is, it's a common thing that throughout different universities, no matter where you are in the world, there's usually different programs that are offered for different universities. What I usually suggest to people is definitely speak with your student counselors, the different people, to see what is available, because a lot of times there are things that are out there that's available, but they don't tell you.
Yeah.
And so it's really important for people to just go and ask and inquire for that. How did you go about choosing what you wanted to do? You said, okay, well, I'm going to do photography. But like, what inspired you to choose the type of photography that you're going to do?
And so for me, when deciding the countries, I knew that I wanted to go to Ghana because I was interested in the African diaspora and things like this. Like Ghana is like so crucial, like the Ghanaian coast is so crucial to the history of the slave trade. Yeah, so I knew that I was very specifically interested in going to Ghana. And outside of that, I was just sort of reaching out to people in my network or people, that were related to my network and things like this, and saying, I'm interested in land, I'm interested in art, and I'm interested in like African people, like who is working in those areas and like who maybe would be interested in collaborating with me.
Ghana was first.
Yeah.
Do you remember first feeling of getting there? What was that? Talk us a little bit through. It could be the first day, it could be the first few days. What were some of your expectations? That was the first time you'd been to Ghana? Yeah,
so before I did all of this, I think I'd been out of the country twice, and both times were like on family vacation. So, or going to Ghana was like way different. It was the first time I'd ever done major travel by myself. It was the first time I'd been to the African continent. I arrived in Accra late at night, and it was it was very stressful. Like, luckily, one of my contacts had come to the airport to pick me up, which was really like helpful for me in that moment. My luggage was lost, which was like this whole thing. And
one of those common things. Yeah,
my luggage was lost, and there was like a mountain of like other lost luggage like in the airport, and I was like tired and dealing with the airport like officials and whatever. But I remember like stepping out of the Accra airport, and there were just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of like black faces like out in the airport. Like it felt like a sea, like a wash of these like faces staring at me. And I just remember feeling like so overwhelmed and like so like wow, like, and just it was just hot, and it was just such a like visceral feeling like first like getting there. Yeah, and then my friend who had picked me up from the airport, like he drove me, and he had two of his other friends. He's actually a YouTuber, and so his like film crew was with him. So it was like me and these three like Ghanaian men, and they were like speeding through Accra, and it was late at night, and it was just so like it just felt super surreal. And I remember waking up the next morning at the place I was staying, and there's a woman yelling like tasty bread. I don't know, like in Ghana. In Ghana, it's the sweet like bread that they eat, and there's this woman like yelling tasty bread and whatever, and so those are like my first like memories of being there. But yeah, like that image of arriving out of the airport, and I don't know what it is about the Accra airport that there are so many people standing outside like that, but I was like, wow, like I'm in an African country like immediately. So, yeah.
It's actually quite common in a lot of African countries and Caribbean, and actually in South America too, is that when one person is coming, there's usually a large group of family. People come from very large families, and everybody goes to the airport to meet them. I know that maybe in the US, a lot of people just make their way home from the airport themselves. But yeah, that is a very common thing. What is it that you're looking for when you want to take your pictures? Like when you explained to me when you first started, like, maybe the first few people you took pictures of, what is it? How does this process work?
It's funny, like this year, it's been me like figuring out how to travel and also figuring out how to photograph like unfamiliar environments. And so my process has really been developing over time, and it's also shifted in different places. Yeah, when I'm photographing, I really enjoy photographing like family environments and like familial environments. And so over time, what I've grown to, or like how my practice has like evolved, is I really like spending like extended time like with specific families, and just like allowing my camera to sort of become integrated into the like everyday familial life, and just photographing images of just intimate like familial moments. It's called like environmental portraiture, I guess is how you would refer to it in technical terms. But yeah, usually, especially when I was in Kenya, I was either I was staying with families, like physically living with families, or I would go and be brought to specific like homes, and I would spend a day just sitting and talking with people and asking them about their family histories and their family relationships to land. And usually we'll alternate between them just living their lives and doing their laundry and cooking and cleaning and taking care of children and doing things like this, and I'm just sitting there with my camera and chatting, and we're talking, and then every now and then I'll pull a couple people aside and say, hey, like, can I set you up in a portrait this way or that way? And so that has been how I've like grown, how my practice has like evolved as I've been traveling.
Okay, so you meet the people.
Yeah.
A lot of them nervous. Are they nervous about this process? So how do you help them get through this? Because it's like, oh my gosh, this person's standing here with this camera. What's going on?
Yeah. I think like it's a huge part of it is relationship building. I've been learning like how important relationship building is to photography and to taking portraits. Yeah, there are like different environments in which like you're taking somebody's photo. Like sometimes, if we're traveling in the streets and we're just walking around at like a parade or something, like I may ask somebody if I can take their photo, and sometimes people are really comfortable with it and sometimes people aren't. And like in that type of environment, like you don't really have a lot of control over like if somebody like feels natural in front of a camera. But I think like when working with certain like families or people like over an extended period of time, and by like investing in the relationship outside of just like the photographic like event, people start to become more comfortable with you. They start to become more comfortable with the camera. I feel like the longer the camera is out and the longer I'm out like photographing, the more people sort of tune it out and become more like less aware of it as well. But yeah, I found that just like working and building relationships with people is really helpful.
As you said, you've been in 3 countries now.
Yeah.
So what were some of the similarities that might have crossed borders?
There are a lot of similarities between Ghana, Kenya, and Ecuador. Is one thing I can say. In terms of hospitality and just like cultural like openness. Like the concept of like large familial cohabitations where you have multiple generations of people living with each other or living in the same place. It's something that's very different than how I grew up individually, or how I think a lot of people grow up in the US, but is very second nature to a lot of the families that I worked with throughout my time traveling in different places. And that's been like one really interesting thing for me, learning more about. Yeah. And
you said you were in Germany also.
Yeah.
In your time in Germany, were you also working with the Afro Germans?
Yeah.
And what was the family like there? Was it a tradition? Is it a family that's been in Germany for years, or is it a family that recently came to Germany in the last few years?
Yeah, so when I was in Berlin, I was living in a neighborhood called the African Quarter. Yeah, I mean, Germany is just a very different, it's just very, very different than any of the other places that I've been to so far. You have a lot of Afro-descendant families who are immigrating to Germany, like in like nuclear families that are immigrating by themselves. And I met a lot of like young biracial Germans who had maybe African parents who were had like one Afro parent and like one German parent or things like this, who were sort of growing up in these dual cultural environments. And I think yeah, and also like I was in Germany during the winter, and so I think there was maybe a bit more of a, I don't know, like it felt like more of like a protective environment, as opposed to like Ghana or Kenya, where people are living in the places that their families have lived for like hundreds of years. Like I felt like in Germany, like community-wise, like when I was sharing space in Ghana or Kenya, like there seemed to be like a sense of like abundance in terms of like, not that Africans and German were less generous, but in Germany it felt more like protective. You know what I mean? Where people were like, here's the information that you need in order to like survive and like function and like do what you need to do.
Yeah, it's sort of like, okay, this is how we survive, and this is the collective that we need to keep ourselves alive.
Right.
You know, Germany is quite interesting because a lot of times when people think of Germany and think of the Afro community, you don't think of Afro-Germans. Yeah. However, Germany has a long history. We're not going to go through that today. Long Afro history. Also, during the Holocaust and those sort of things, the Afros that were there, you know, going through concentration camps also because they were considered impure. Yeah. But yeah, we're not going to touch on that today. But that all of that makes the dynamics of what you will see in current day Germany as far as the Afro community goes. Yourself, I know that you still have one more country to go. You still have to go to Mexico. But if you've noticed that you've like started to change in any way, if you notice that some of the things that you have seen or some of the things that you have experienced along the way has made you go, let me, you know, just think about this in a different way.
Yeah, I think like one of the main things that I've been considering a lot, especially as a Black person from the US, like not common that I think of myself as a person that like holds power over others or who's like in an empowered position. And like a huge thing for me this past year, especially being in Ghana, Kenya, and now Ecuador, is like thinking about like my status as an American and like how that impacts like my political positionality to the people that I'm working with. And that's definitely magnified by like being a photographer and taking images of people and from people. And so that's been a major thing, the major theme that I've been like thinking about more deeply. And Ecuador has like provided like an unexpected nuance to that question as well. And then also I think like just on like a purely personal level, like I just have become like a lot more like adaptable, I think, as a person, like with traveling. Before, when I was living in the US, like I went to a small high school, I went to a small college, like I was used to like becoming very close with people over like long stretches, like long periods of time. And I think like traveling has like forced me to become like much more intimate with people like much more quickly, and to like be more like emotionally vulnerable with people than I was previously used to, which I think is also just like part of the cultural environments of a lot of these places that I've been in. Like there's just a different relationship with like intercommunal connection.
Let's go back again with the camera in your hand, you're walking along.
Yeah.
Do you remember a moment where you're like, okay, I've got to take this picture? Like one of those moments where it's just like, okay, so give us a little bit about that. Like give us one of those moments where you're like, okay, I've got to take this picture. Just this is so inspiring at this moment.
I'm trying to think. I think one of my favorite photos that I've taken was that I was with my friend at a festival in Cape Coast, and there was this photographing like some people that were in the crowd, or there was just a procession of people that were coming, and there was just like this moment where this like in the like festival procession where like it just paused, and I was like, this feels like a Renaissance painting, like it's just like this like millisecond like of a moment, and I like took the picture. I was actually thinking about this photo when I was describing the feeling of coming out of the airport and seeing like all these like hundreds and hundreds of like faces like in front of me. Like I felt like that moment like really like evoked that feeling of sort of like, I don't know, but that was like one image that I took, and it just felt so spontaneous, and like I just took it and I was like, this is like the perfect photo. I love this photo. In the photo, it has it's like these people who were like in the festival all like riding on motorbikes, and there's maybe like 40 or 50 different people like in the photo, like traveling on motorbikes in different configurations. In like the center of the image, there's like a little boy traveling sort of in his dad's lap towards the front of the motorbike, and his eyes are kind of closed and his head is just like tilted in this position, just like the sea of just like African people like traveling, and there's like the sense of like movement in the image at the same time. Yeah.
Okay. No, that sounds pretty emotional.
Yeah.
So these pictures that you're taking, is there going to be an exhibition later on? Do you have a web page, Instagram? Yeah. How can people see these photographs?
Yeah, so I'm going to Mexico for an artist residency in Mexico City. And so at the end of my residency, I think it's in mid-July, I'll have a public presentation of a lot of these images in Mexico City, which is really exciting. And I hope to continue to exhibit and present these images in the future as well. But that's like immediate. Okay.
But this information, do you have a web page or something that we could put in the podcast notes so that people could see where you're exhibiting and so forth?
Yeah, my website is www.skyejalal.com, and I have a lot of my work up there, and definitely like all of the exhibition information as well.
You know, you're taking these pictures, you're going to 5 countries. What's the overall message?
My overall message? I think like for me, as I'm starting to sort of knit together the work, like I think kinship is like, it's just a word that comes up for me. Like when I'm looking through these images, like the photos that I've been taking are just very intimate and very, they have like a element of like spirituality. And I think it's interesting how that sort of like soft feeling of community and home is reappearing in these images of different communities like around the world. And so that's one of the main things that is coming up. That you want to... Okay. Yeah.
Any final messages that you would like to, the microphone's yours now. I don't know if there's anything that it could be a younger classman, like somebody else who's studying and maybe thinking of doing this program that you're on. Maybe it's somebody who's into photography. Maybe it's just the average person in your community. Is there anything that you'd like to say to them?
Yeah, I think like speaking from like an American perspective, like I was having a conversation with a friend of mine also from Kenya I knew her from college. And she was saying how when she got to college, she immigrated from Kenya to the U.S. just for undergrad. And she said she was shocked by like how uncurious people in our college were about her experience coming from another place. And I think like part of that is because like growing up in the U.S., like your perspective is so U.S. centric. That like it's hard to even fathom like how interesting like another person's like experience could be like coming from a different place.
So your final message is come out, come and see, come and travel, come and journey.
Yeah, and also just to like be more curious with the people in your community in wherever you are. Like I think like there's a lot that can be learned and a lot of ways to like deconstruct like your American perspective as well, like from within the borders, because it's a country of immigrants, so yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of El Cafecito Travel Talks with Tony Lloyd. If you'd like to learn more about today's guest, check the podcast notes for links and information related to this episode. And if you have questions, stories, or topics you'd love us to explore in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Tony also helps independent travelers plan meaningful journeys throughout Central and South America, including cultural and community-based experiences. And if you'd like to support the podcast and help keep these conversations going, you'll find a contribution link in the podcast notes. Until next time, thank you for sharing a cafecito or tea with us, and safe travels wherever your journey may take you.